Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast. I'm Mike Calabrese, and this is our College World Series special as we head to the cavernous confines of Charles Schwab Field in Omaha, Nebraska. That's going to have a major impact on some of these teams that have been living and dying by the long ball. We are down to 8 here in college baseball, so we're going to run through all the matchups in bracket 1 and bracket 2. That, of course, means Wake Forest taking on Stanford, LSU playing Tennessee, TCU playing the Cinderella of the NCAA tournament for baseball, that is Oral Roberts, and Virginia against Florida in a number 2 versus number 7 matchup. That's incredibly interesting. And we're going to bring in the top ace, top of our lineup, top of our bullpen, top of our starting, pitching, rotation, however you want to fit into the lineup here, Collin. You did such a great job for us in the last episode. To quote Leonardo DiCaprio from The Wolf of Wall Street, you were handing out fun coupons in the form of winning bets. You were on Oral Roberts, who won 23 of 24. Let me get started with this. How nervous were you when they blew that huge lead to Oregon in game 1? Did you lose any faith, or were you just with the Golden Eagles the whole way?
Listen, when you actually play sports, especially something like baseball, and you get on a huge streak, whether that's you at the plate or whether that's your team in a winning streak, and you lose an 8-0 lead and you lose a game like that, you either have the chance to respond and then go out and win the whole damn thing, or you have a chance to fold. And I really thought in game 2 that Oral Roberts was going to fold. I mean, we're catching balls on the outfield fence and dropping them. We're trying to give the game away. That, in all actuality, when we came on this podcast last week, I said, I've got Oral Roberts minus 200, minus 180 in all these games. I watched all 3 games. They were better than Oregon. They were flat out better in a hostile environment. They have the better pitching staff. They have timely hitting, but they looked like a deer in the headlights with a rowdy, pale non-town Eugene Ducks all over them all weekend. So I'm glad that they pulled it out, and I'm glad they cashed for the pod. They move on to face TCU, where we took a future on them on the podcast last week. So it's kind of played out perfectly there. But those 2 are definitely Cinderella when you look at these 8 teams.
Just a programming note for our audience. You're listening here to the Big Bets on Campus podcast brought to you by BetMGM, but we are going to shift over to the Action Network podcast next week as we detail the national championship final, the best of 3 between the winners of bracket 1 and bracket 2. So let's hop in. Let's start at the top of the board. Wake Forest is, continuing their dream season. They're back in the College World Series with a chance to win. They're plus 275 in the futures, and they could become the first number 1 overall seed to win since 1999, the very first year of this current format when the Miami Hurricanes won the whole thing. Top to bottom, they can really hit. 6 players in the Demon Deacons bat over 300. Another one bats 299. They have 3 all ACC first team pitchers, which is just absurd. Josh Hartle, great cutter. That's what I noticed, watching him and some of the highlights from this year. Sean Sullivan, the Northwestern transfer, was a great get for them. As a lefty, he has an interesting arm angle as well. And then, of course, the number 1 guy in the rotation, Rhett Lauder. He's been phenomenal, 2-time ACC Pitcher of the Year, 15-0 this year, ERA of 1.92. We talked a little bit about the curse of being the number 1 overall seed. They're able to get out of their, super regional. Now they come into Omaha. Is the pressure off a little bit in terms of no longer having to play in front of their home crowd, no longer carrying the expectations of this is the dream season? You have to at least make it to Omaha not to be considered a bust. Is there any kind of psychological advantage now that Wake Forest lands and also draws a Stanford team that, let's be honest, they were lucky to sneak past Texas in Palo Alto, winning with that kind of weird blue pop fly game winner? That was a heartbreaker if you're a Longhorns fan, and obviously a great moment for Stanford. I believe this is their 3rd straight ticket to the World Series. So what are your thoughts on that first matchup between Wake and Stanford?
I mean, like, focusing on Stanford, Texas, there's a reason why I've been writing about college baseball for years for Action Network, and the number 1 thing I talk about all the time is fielding percentage. And if you don't think that matters, go watch the end of Stanford and Texas. It's college baseball. This isn't MLB. There's no such thing as an easy double play. There's no such thing as an easy throw from 3rd over to 1st. I mean, again, these are kids that weren't drafted at 18 years old. They weren't scouted at 15 years old. So fielding percentage absolutely matters. But when it comes to Wake Forest, I don't think they're feeling anything. I mean, I know that they hosted the regional, they hosted the super regional. They're very comfortable at home, 30-3 at home, but they're also 16-6 on the road this year. And I think a big key element that you and I need to talk about on this podcast with all of these matchups is the park dimensions. TD Ameritrade is huge. It is spacious. It is 375 in left and right center. It's got a center field wall at 408. It's got foul poles at 335. There is 52 feet between home plate and the first row of seats. It is gratuitous in foul territory. So what you're going to see in the market, and as you know, Mike, as you and I are doing this, there's no totals up in the market right now, but we were used to seeing 12, 14, a couple 16 and a halves during supers. That's gone. If you see anything above a 10, it's probably too high. If you see anything below an 8, which you won't, then it's probably too low. But for the most part, 8.5 to 10 is where most of these fall. Check in on the weather. The wind is going to be below 10 miles an hour all for the first week. And then if you check, the wind direction, that's really important in Omaha because it can switch and go left and right. But as far as answering Wake Forest, I don't think they feel any pressure whatsoever. They are absolutely dominating. Only that one game against Alabama. Other than that, almost every game they've had hasn't been decided within 12 runs. They're an absolute machine right now.
Speaking of a team that relies on home runs, let's stick in bracket 2. LSU plus 380 to win the whole thing. They were just hitting homers left and right out of their little bandbox down there in Baton Rouge against Kentucky. They hit 7 home runs in 2 games, scored 22 runs overall. But they come in here with arguably the most dominant pitcher in all of college baseball, Paul Skeens, 188 Ks in just 107 innings worth of work. And then the top of their lineup, it's not just the ability to hit the ball out of the park. Dylan Cruz sets the table. He's batting .433 at the leadoff. Tommy White slugging .750, and he's 3 shy of 100 RBIs on the season. And then they got 4 more hitters behind him, all batting over 300. So LSU currently, I would argue, has the best offense and the highest upside of the 8 remaining teams. But do they have the depth from a pitching rotation, perspective to be able to go 3-0 or 3-1 and punch their ticket to the College World Series final?
No, they don't. And I hate saying that because I love LSU and I love the offense. And Dylan Cruz is going to be the number 1 pick in the MLB draft. And Paul Skeens is going to be taken in the first round. And he is the National College Player of the Year. And there's a reason for that. He's going to absolutely dominate a game. The problem with this LSU team is that their head coach, Jay Johnson, he's just dead set on not allowing anyone to know who the starting pitcher is going to be leading up to the games. Until an hour before first pitch, you still might not even know if it's going to be Ty Floyd or if it's going to be Paul Skeens. And that is, a really huge handicap because the biggest bugaboo with this LSU team is their bullpen. Their bullpen gives up a lot of runs. This offense, I hate to say anything bad about the offense because they're second in the nation in home runs per 9. They're second in slugging, second in on base, but they're also 162nd in doubles. They don't hit a lot of wall bangers. And when you get to TD Ameritrade, it is not Alex Box Stadium. And you have to be able to hit, move runners, advance runners, have a couple sacrifices. You just can't be reliant on home runs. And that's where I worry about this LSU team. Although Dylan Cruz, that he's probably going to get walked. I expect every pitcher in this bracket to be walking him. But when you put out the numbers against Tennessee, it doesn't matter. The number's already inflated in the market right now. I believe -170 to -180 is what I'm seeing out there for LSU in game 1 against Tennessee. That number should not be above -140. If it's Ty Floyd going, that number is more around a pick to -115. But it doesn't matter if it's Andrew Lindsay or Chase Dollander. LSU is inflated in the market because of the perception that Paul Skeens is going to pitch. But once you get past him, oh, by the way, Tennessee saw him back on March 30th and had no problems racking up a bunch of hits. And I know it was 7 innings. It was good ball that he threw, but they were hittable. Tennessee could hit him. So we'll see how that plays out because after Skeens, I don't know what else LSU has to make a deep run in this tournament.
Speaking of Tennessee, help me kind of figure them out a little bit because they're sitting here plus 750 to win the national championship. But prior to this run, they were kind of a middling SEC team. They finished 16-14 in conference play. They got shut up by A&M in the first round of the SEC tournament, and then they turned it all around. They've won 5 of 6. They beat Charlotte twice in the regional to advance. Then they came back from a Game 1 loss to Southern Miss in Hattiesburg and won 8-4 and 5-0 to close it out. And when you look at their team, potentially when you combine it with the park that they're pitching in, their power pitching unit, they're second nationally in strikeouts, second nationally in staff ERA. My only question is, do they have enough offense to squeeze by if their pitching staff really brings it in this game? Because Jared Dickey is their only all SEC pick. He was second team, and he only has 2 hits in his last 5 games. They really need someone like him to, carry some more weight for them in their lineup. Do you think the Vols are a live dog here right away to win game 1?
I do. I've already placed a bet on Tennessee. I'm going to be placing a larger bet on the run line because it is priced about 40 cents too high on LSU. And there's a couple of advantages that Tennessee has in this matchup and that they have throughout the College World Series. LSU and Tennessee have the same fielding ranks, but it's important to know that, Tennessee is second in the nation in earned run average versus the staff. And they're also second in the nation strikeout to walk ratio. And you say, well, how do I know that that means anything? So I went and posted an article like a month ago. What are the key stats that determine a college baseball World Series winner? It's strikeout to walk ratio. The average rank of all of the champions over the past 15 years in strikeout to walk ratio was 19th in the nation. You have to have an entire staff that can strike out just as many as they face and way more than they walk. Right now, Tennessee is second in the nation as a staff in strikeout to walk ratio. So it's not like they're ultra dependent on one pitcher. They have a full staff. Can they hit enough against Paul Skins? Probably not. No, not at all. Against Ty Floyd in the bullpen? Absolutely. So that's the key. We'll see who the starting pitcher is, but I've already bought Tennessee because no matter if LSU's throwing their ace, it's still overpriced.
So let's hop up to bracket 1 and this matchup between TCU and Oral Roberts. I think this is fascinating. I'm actually a little bit shocked to see the price differential between these two to win the national championship being so stark. TCU 8-1, Oral Roberts 22-1. Yes, Cole Klecker looked as good as he's looked all season against Indiana State. He was masterful there for the Horned Frogs. They were gifted home field advantage in that one. And my big concern is this. You talked about moving runners over and playing a little bit of small ball. TCU's 49th in team ERA, but they walk a ton of guys, 178th out of 305 D1 teams in walks issued. Can they keep pace with an Oral Roberts team that is just blasting, teams offensively? When you look at what they've done, as I mentioned at the top, they've won 23 of 24 straight up. Their team batting average is 6th nationally at 322, which is phenomenal. And then they have an absolute killer in Jonah Cox. Their center fielder has been great during this postseason run, batting 400, 2 homers, 9 RBIs in 6 games, and he's on a 47-game hit streak, the 3rd longest in Division I history. So when you put all this together and you look at the Golden Eagles team ERA at 3.97, that's 7th nationally, to me, I think they should be favored here. And the fact that you're on the other side of the bracket from Wake Forest, I think is a bit of a gift. So am I too bullish on the Cinderella here? Am I getting wrapped up in the emotion and the narrative, or should they be favored over the Horned Frogs?
They absolutely should be favored. I project Jacob Hall in the first game, whether it's Cole Klecker or Cam Brown going for TCU. I make it exactly minus 195. And, I've gone through it before. This is based on runs per game, base runs, FIP, XFIP, bullpen, expected innings pitched. I've got Jacob Hall getting to the 7th. I've got Cole Klecker not getting through the 5th, and Cam Brown for TCU not even getting out of the 4th. If you look at their season averages, but I think the thing that and you talk about TCU walking a lot of players. How many times did Oral Roberts score runs in Eugene because they were walked all inning? I mean, they took complete advantage of that. And if it happens against TCU, they're going to score a bunch of runs. But the biggest difference between these two teams, and by the way, before I call out the biggest difference between these two teams, Oral Roberts is number 1 in the nation in fielding percentage. I mean, this is BBOC is a fielding percentage podcast. Oral Roberts is number 1 in the nation, right? So they're 16th, that ultra, can you win the College World Series? It depends on strikeout to walk ratio. Oral Roberts is 16th in the nation. They have checked the boxes everywhere you need to be a threat to win here. Now, specifically against TCU, where is the huge discrepancy? You mentioned it, Mike. I mean, you can't be ultra reliant on bombs when you come to TD Ameritrade Park. It's just too big. But really the biggest difference in this is the bullpens and the staff ERAs. TCU comes in at 71st. Oral Roberts comes in at 16th. When you do a combined ERA, FIP, and XFIP average, TCU is 1.1 higher in the number than Oral Roberts. This should be Oral Roberts minus 190. I said it a week ago. I'll say it again. The market, the odds makers, the market, and bettors are just not respecting what the praying hands of South Tulsa are doing.
From Tulsa, Oklahoma to a matchup of two Southern schools, Virginia against Florida. They're both 7-2 to win the national title. I'm going to start with my thoughts on the Wahoos here. They lead the nation in batting average. They're first in doubles by a wide margin. You bring up, the power alley and what you want to do in this huge ballpark in Omaha. They're seventh in runs. They're not a home run team, but they are a big inning team. And you saw it in their 5-run second inning to close out Duke. I'm just going to walk through what they did in that inning. A double, a walk, a ground out, single, 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 another walk, a single, a walk, and they hit into a double play. They get 5 runs out of it. That to me seems like the formula to be able to go out and break a Florida pitching staff that can be really strong. Now, on the other side, UVA has had a strong staff the entire season. They're third in team ERA at 3.64, 15th in strikeouts. And of course, the nation was introduced to Stephen Schoch as their closer. Kenny Powers 2.0, minus the substance abuse. 8 saves on the season, ERA of 3, 52 Ks in 36 innings. I love the guy. Everyone who listened to him wax poetic about Dippin' Dots and everything else during his post-game speech, I think fell in love with him as well. And then the other side, you have the Florida Gators, who I would argue, the 800-pound gorilla in this matchup. They spend the entire season more or less in the top 3 in the AP. They have such a balanced lineup, and they have the collegiate version of Ohtani in Jack Caglione. 81 Ks in 69 innings pitched, 31 home runs, batting .336, and he hits like 97, 98 on the gun. No big deal. So Florida probably has, more of the top end talent, but Virginia as a team, I feel like is playing better team baseball right now. Am I seeing this matchup in the right way? Because as I mentioned, with both of them at 9-2, not 7-2, plus 450 to win the national title, is there more value on either one of them, or should you go with Virginia?
I have Virginia winning this game in game 1 against Florida, but I expect with the depth of Florida's arms, what they have, and you mentioned all of them, they have enough to go through the losers bracket and really give TCU and Oral Roberts slam shut the Cinderella slipper. Florida has way too much pitching. I mean, when you have position players that are making 16 starts and throwing, X amount of strikeouts, it's pretty impressive. The depth, and really that calls out the depth, right? Oral Roberts and TCU do not have the depth in the pitching to hang with Florida, who on day 3, 4, 5 of this marathon absolutely does. Now, when we talk about a head-to-head matchup of Virginia against Florida, I was shocked to see what my projections were, again, based on base runs, based on runs per game, based on FIPS, xFIPS, and projected innings started. I've got Brandon Sproat as an underdog to Connolly Early, who may not be the game 1 starter. I'm pretty sure Nick Parker is going to be the game 1 starter for Virginia. So Virginia over Brandon Sproat would be minus 165. Nick Parker over Hurston Waldrop would be minus 165. I don't think it's going to be Hurston Waldrop. He'll probably get game 2 privileges of thinking that they'll make it to the winner's bracket. But no matter how you slice it, I have Virginia minus 165 favorite in this first game. And I'm a little shocked myself that it's that high, but when you look at the fact that Virginia averages 8.4 runs per game, Florida is more than a half run lower than that. When you look at bullpen ERAs, it just Virginia beats them in every single category. And if we're looking for someone to win this bracket, this team is number 1 in batting average. This team is number 1 in doubles per game. Extremely important in a cavernous park like TD Ameritrade. And oh, by the way, our all important strikeout to walk ratio, Virginia is 4th in the nation. So when you talk about national champion contenders, that you always have to focus on that. They have the better staff. Florida's 30th in strikeout to walk ratio. There's nothing that wrong with that. It ain't too shabby. 35th in staff ERA, not too bad. But you're not Virginia, and your offense does not hit as many doubles or advanced runners in the scoring department. They're 33rd versus Virginia is 8th in scoring. There's just too many boxes that Virginia has the upper advantage in this. So give me Virginia with, the odds that I say it should be higher than what they are.
So you're painting a picture for a journey for the Gators, potentially losing, right off the bat, but then surviving in the losers bracket and potentially pushing and still giving themselves a chance to get to the College World Series final. So they're a team, because of their depth overall and their arms, that they could weather a loss in game 1. What's a team in, the final 8 here that absolutely has to win right off the bat for them to feel comfortable about getting to the championship?
That's a great question, because when you look at the arms, if Stanford goes, if Stanford lines up against Wake Forest and they throw Quinn Matthews, who just threw 156 pitches and dominated the super regional, when Stanford uses that card, if they don't get a win out of that, it's good night. Yeah, they're toast. It's gone. I don't think TCU and Oral Roberts have the depth to hang around at all, but Stanford is really the one. If you don't cash in against Wake Forest using Quinn Matthews, it's going to be rough. Now, Joey Dixon pitched, I don't know, I think maybe 20 pitches, 15 pitches in that last game against Texas. So I don't think that he's going to be taxed or tired if he does get the start against Wake. But once you don't want to take Quinn Matthews into the losers bracket, you probably want him to throw right away. And if you burn that card and Wake Forest beats you, it's going to be a quick tournament for Stanford.
So what I'm hearing from you is that Wake and Virginia are your winners of the two brackets meeting in the national championship. At this point, if you had to offer a third team to say that there is just great value, or you're interested in, kind of hedging your bets a little bit, who's your, we'll call it 2B pick to be the third team kind of messing around with a chance to go to the final?
It'd be Florida. I think Florida is close enough to Virginia, and the deal with that is that you've got to get to their third and fourth starter, right? That's where Florida's power is that they have more arms and more appearances from stronger guys in the bullpen and the stoppers. But when it comes to a starting pitcher of Connolly Early and Nick Parker, that's a bad combination. Now, it's the same thing with Wake Forest, right? After you get past Rhett Lauder and Josh Hartle, the pitching really falls off from a starting perspective. They go the Tampa Bay Rays model, where it's like 2 innings by everybody that'll come out. That's the only game that you're going to be able to snatch on Wake Forest. As to where you go down to Virginia and Florida, Florida is the team. If I had to swap out one of these bracket winners, it would be swapping out Virginia for Florida, because Florida has the arms.
One last question for you in terms of putting together your bets, whether it's single game to advance, to win the national championship. Are there any managers of the last 8 teams here that are just a plus, for lack of a better word, and really do a great job of either managing their staff or playing small ball, or making those tiny adjustments throughout the game? Some of it can just be as simple as really understanding how to manage a rotation, as you just mentioned, kind of going the Tampa Bay Rays model and using a de facto third pitcher by committee. Is there anyone here that stands above the rest in your eyes?
Well, I think 2 of the best head coaches here, and I guess it's time for me to mend that bridge across the Mississippi River from Arkansas to Tennessee. Tony Vitello is fantastic at managing his bullpen, managing Burns, managing, how long Dollander is going to go, how long Lindsey's going to go. Seth Halverson has been one of the best closers in the nation. That staff is managed very well. I have a lot of respect for Tony Vitello and how he manages that team. But I think the one that's above him is Ryan Fulmer for Oral Roberts. You saw pitching changes after each out for each batter against Eugene, against Oregon. And that tells me that we've got a head coach that has every single stick on the opponent's side scouted, and he knows which arm in his bullpen matches up, because I saw Ryan Fulmer make a walk out to the mound like every 60 seconds in Eugene. But and every decision he made was the right one. So if there are 2 teams that definitely have a coaching advantage, I've got Tennessee winning their first game against LSU. I've got Oral Roberts heavily projected over TCU in game 1.
This has been the Big Bets on Campus podcast, brought to you by BetMGM. A reminder to our audience, we're going to see if we can fit in an extra episode here on BBOC next week. But for certain, we're going to be moving over to the Action Network podcast to do an in-depth preview of the national championship, that best of 3 series, which is starting a week from Saturday. So be sure to flip on over on your podcast app of choice and make sure to listen to that, to download, to subscribe, tell a friend, tell an enemy. You know how we do here at BBOC. For Collin Wilson, I'm Mike Calabrese. Thank you so much for listening, and best of luck with your bets.